Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Ishtar Hawkins. Well, in the news today, COVID-19 still dominating our news. Food shortages increasing as millions of Americans are out of work. Food banks are struggling to keep up, and along with that, we see some processing plants now closing their doors. We'll have those details because of the coronavirus hitting them. And also, New York finally has a little glimmer of hope as they see the hospitalizations now starting to dwindle. And also a couple international stories, one Iran and what they're struggling with the sanctions that are imposed on them from the United States and how that is affecting them along with the coronavirus. Well, these stories and more, but first, we're all familiar with the novel coronavirus pandemic, but what exactly is the coronavirus? And have we seen anything similar to this in the past? How does it invade a person's body and what areas does it target? Well, to learn more, let's take a look at these videos.
So the whole family of coronaviruses are named coronavirus because corona means crown, And so this refers to the way that the virus looks under the microscope, like there's a crown on the top of the virus. Some of them, 4 or 5 different kinds, cause common diseases among humans. Everything from the common cold to mild or moderate respiratory illnesses. Other kinds of coronaviruses affect animals. And sometimes, on rare occasions, we see coronaviruses jump from animal species into the human population. The 2019 novel coronavirus is getting a lot of attention now because it is a new kind of coronavirus we haven't seen among humans before. The theory is that it may have jumped from an animal species into the human population and then begun spreading. We have seen some people that have died of this disease, and we know that there are already thousands of cases. So people are concerned because we don't yet know exactly how severe the disease will be or how far it will spread. When a new virus emerges, we often have to learn much more about it. And one of the things that we question is how does it transmit from person to person? We know that most respiratory viruses are spread by large droplets that come out when people cough and sneeze and stay aloft usually for about 6 feet in front of them. They land on surfaces and then can also be transmitted between person to person by touching those surfaces, such as doorknobs or other surfaces.
The disease spreads through small droplets that are expelled from the nose or mouth when a person with COVID-19 coughs or exhales. Therefore, standing close to someone who is infected can put you at risk. These droplets can land on your hand and be transmitted through something as simple as a handshake, if afterwards you touch your eyes, nose, or mouth, the so-called T-zone. The virus is known to survive on different types of surfaces, so touching these contaminated surfaces and then touching your T-zone brings a high risk of infection.
How does COVID-19 affect the body? The virus is fitted with protein spikes sticking out of the envelope that forms the surface and houses a core of genetic material. Any virus that enters your body looks for cells with compatible receptors, ones that allow it to invade the cell. Once they find the right cell, they enter and use the cell's replication machinery to create copies of themselves. It is likely that COVID-19 uses the same receptor as SARS, found in both lungs and small intestines. It is thought that COVID-19 shares many similarities with SARS, which has 3 phases of attack: viral replication, hyperreactivity of the immune system, and finally, pulmonary destruction. Early on in infection, the coronavirus invades two types of cells in the lungs, mucus and cilia cells. Mucus keeps your lungs from drying out and protects them from pathogens. Cilia beat the mucus towards the exterior of your body, clearing debris, including viruses, out of your lungs. Cilia cells are the preferred hosts of SARS-CoV and are likely the preferred hosts of the new coronavirus. When these cells die, they slough off into your airways, filling them with debris and fluid. Symptoms include a fever, cough, and breathing difficulties. Many of those infected get pneumonia in both their lungs. Enter the immune system. Immune cells recognize the virus and flood into the lungs. The lung tissue becomes inflamed. During normal immune function, the inflammatory process is highly regulated and is confined to infected areas. However, sometimes the immune system overreacts, and this results in damage to healthy tissue. More cells die and slough off into the lungs, further clogging them and worsening the pneumonia. As damage to the lungs increases, stage 3 begins, potentially resulting in respiratory failure. Patients that reach this stage of infection can incur permanent lung damage or even die. We see the same lesions in the lungs of those infected by the novel coronavirus as those with SARS. SARS creates holes in the lungs, so they look honeycomb-like. This is probably due to the aforementioned overreactive immune response, which affects both healthy and infected tissue, and creates scars that stiffen the lungs. As such, some patients may require ventilators to aid breathing. The inflammation also results in more permeable alveoli. Alveoli are the location of the thin interface of gas exchange, where your lungs replace carbon dioxide in your blood with fresh oxygen you just inhaled. Increased permeability causes fluid to leak into the lungs. This decreases the lungs' ability to oxygenate blood, and in severe cases, floods them so that you become unable to breathe. The immune system's overreaction can also cause another kind of damage. Proteins called cytokines are the immune system's alarm system, recruiting immune cells to the infection site. Overproduction of cytokines can result in a cytokine storm, where there is large-scale inflammation in the body. Blood vessels become more permeable and fluid seeps out. This makes it difficult for blood and oxygen to reach the rest of the body, and can result in multi-organ failure. This has happened in the most severe cases of COVID-19.
Very interesting how that works and how it spreads.
And similar to the SARS, as they mentioned there, so you can see these viruses, they're very similar, although they're a little bit different.
Right, right. Well, never before has the world experienced an Easter Sunday like this, with social distancing policies in place across the globe due to the coronaviruses. What many Christians deem the holiest day of the year was spent in solitude. Some ignored their local and state guidelines, like Reverend Tony Spell in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who invited the public into his mega church for Easter worship. But many churches simply met with their parishioners online.
Well, there are now over 500,000 Americans who've been infected with the virus, and the death toll has climbed to more than 21,000. In California, officials are most concerned about the elderly living in nursing homes. Now, more and more staff are deciding not to come to work due to the stress they are under in caring for sick patients and the fear of contracting the coronavirus themselves. Well, there is little to no PPE available, as we've reported in the past, so nurses are having to use things like trash bags as gowns.
Wow, that's a little scary. But the scene in New York is still worse than ever or anywhere else in the country. At the epicenter of the pandemic, the ICUs all over New York City and its surrounding boroughs are full to overflowing with COVID-positive patients. As of 3 days ago, there were 18,500 patients hospitalized. New York State's death toll has now taken 9,000 lives, and the victims whose bodies have not been claimed by relatives are being buried in mass graves to lighten the burden on the morgues.
Wow. Well, with such a fast and furious spreading illness, the country is eager for a glimmer of hope to hold on to. Governor Andrew Cuomo believes social distancing is that light at the end of the tunnel. He was hopeful in the latest briefing, saying, "We're not seeing a great decline in numbers, but we're seeing a flattening."
But some are concerned the social distancing and other requirements might turn into martial law. In Philadelphia, the transportation authorities are apologizing as they came under investigation by police department. Videos have emerged of an officer dragging a man off a public bus last week for not wearing a face mask.
Wow. Well, but those most vulnerable to getting the coronavirus in the U.S. are the nursing homes. Over the weekend, Juniper Village Nursing Home in Aurora, Colorado, experienced 5 deaths, making it a new area to be concerned about. Now, the Wall Street Journal published a survey which found over 2,100 nursing homes have facilities that have the patients actually been infected with the COVID-19 and have lost 2,300 lives to the virus.
Wow. Well, as food shortages continue and grocery stores remain bare, some are flocking to feed barns to stock up on chickens. Yep, live chickens. In Ogden, Utah, one feed store sold 169 chicks in just 3 hours.
Well, the farm supplier IFA Country Store says baby chick sales are up almost 30%. Sandy Shute is a poultry department director and said, people start panicking. We need chicks. We got to have them right now. And that's when we realize there's going to be an issue with supply and demand.
Well, the chicken boom is being fueled by the fears of not having protein sources such as eggs and meat. With grocery stores limiting the amount of eggs you can buy, people are taking matters into their own hands. At Rivertown Country Feed and Pet Store in Petaluma, California, chicks are being sold as soon as they arrive.
Well, Humane Society President Kitty Block says people should do the research. Well, baby chicks are certainly adorable, she says, and I absolutely understand the attraction to them. But when they grow up and become chickens, it's a lot of work. Now, chickens take about 6 months before they start laying eggs, and that's only after, she said, a lot of work to get them to that point.
That's right. Well, some are concerned all this chicken pandemic buying will lead to an overabundance of chickens at local animal shelters. Well, buying a chicken from the store is one thing, but raising them from a baby chick to a whole different process, which many right now are just, they're basically just, they're trying to wing it. And, you know, you'd think that instead of doing that, they would just go ahead and process the chickens and store them or eat them. But, you know, they're worried about them actually ending up at the animal shelter because people don't know what to do with them.
Well, Purdue Farms, located in Kathleen, Georgia, had 50 workers walk off the job mid-shift to protest against the dangerous conditions they currently face inside the slaughterhouse walls. The employees who walked out told a local news station they don't feel safe working at the plant during the coronavirus pandemic, and they want the plant to do more to protect its workers. Now, one worker commented, "We're out here risking our life for a chicken."
Well, the protesters began after workers learned multiple employees had tested positive for COVID-19 and feared catching the virus themselves. Workers started live streaming to their social media accounts to raise awareness about their fears they share about spreading the pandemic. Purdue has responded to its employees' concerns by offering hand sanitizer, to which employers, or workers that is, have described as being unacceptable.
Right, they needed to do more than just the hand sanitizer. Well, one of the largest pork processing plants in the country is closing its doors until further notice. Virginia-based Smithfield Foods, located in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, announced it would stop production as hundreds of its employees tested positive for the COVID-19 virus. Now, Smithfield Foods employs about 3,700 workers.
Well, we're going to go take a look into what China has been doing in regards to the response of dealing with not only COVID-19, but what is some of what they see as some of the cause of it. I know the wet markets were an issue before, but how they're dealing with pigs in treating this matter. Larry, what do you have for us?
It is easier to respect all life when one is aware that all life supports all life, and at the same time, it is easier to be malicious and cruel when that knowledge is absent. With swine, which are often misused as food, being fingered as a contributing cause to the complex amalgamation and manifestation of the coronavirus, it should be no surprise then to find high infection rates among major pork producers. Due to this, some large corporations are being compelled by circumstances to support ancient values and discontinue offering their products to the public. But any cheer for public health is quickly dampened in the minds of environmentally conscious folk at the recollection of what pork producers have done in the past with live inventory that they no longer consider to be profitable. Videos online are making their rounds to offer education in that regard, including a gruesome tape of a business disposing of a herd in China by placing them into a deep pit and setting them ablaze while they squealed in agony. Afterwards, the pigs, which were still alive and in the last throes of their incinerated slaughter, had their final breaths smothered out of their charred bodies by a live burial. It would be a sad irony to see some of those same elements come upon the perpetrators. Even where those things that were actually designed to be food are concerned, the first plague to generate this level of attention ever is also producing a great ripple effect of global fears. Food stability and the world's staff of bread are the greatest concerns. Many nations from America to India fear large-scale disruptions to the world's fragile system of food distribution will have difficulty healing quickly from the negative impacts of the outbreak, if it even heals at all. But in either case scenario, that means famines. There are reduced cases of admissions to intensive care units in New York, and with that, the state has now become cautiously optimistic. Mayor Cuomo is attributing the decrease to the effectiveness of restricting the high levels of physical contact which have become typical of American culture. And the federal government is warning against states reopening too soon and not giving the virus sufficient time to abate. The states themselves, however, are operating on varying time frames. The areas hit first have entered their peaks, and as they move into their 5th month of weathering the calamity, they are becoming hopeful as they see new cases diminishing and the virus leaving just as it came. Meanwhile, states like Massachusetts and Maryland that were smart later as the wound began to spread have yet to hit their peaks and are bracing hard to absorb the blow. The economic fallout has produced a swelling number of people seeking food relief. The government is said to be set to throw more money at the problem in the coming days as a part of a $1 trillion stimulus package. Undeniable infections have now stimulated a reluctant Iran into action. President Rouhani is reported to have initially downplayed the arrival of the plague in his country and derided the admonitions to follow suit with the precautionary measures being taken by other nations as a plot by Iran's enemies to shut down the country. The affliction is as real for Persia as it is for every other nation, however, and so after hundreds of deaths and thousands of infections, including some of his own staff, President Rouhani is now petitioning the IMF for emergency funds to address the crisis in his country. Iranian officials say that America is blocking those efforts, but the country is nonetheless scheduled to reopen, however, by the end of April, the virus having reportedly been present in the country and wreaking havoc clandestinely since January. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Looks like Iran is getting hit doubly hard there with not only having to deal with the coronavirus, but then also the sanctions from the U.S. making it almost impossible for them to get the supplies they need to treat their patients.
Right. And again, like we said before, it's the people that suffer the most with these type of issues.
Well, the world's largest oil producers have agreed to a deal to reduce oil production. Now, since demand for oil has plummeted amid the coronavirus, so has the price per barrel. So Russia and other oil-producing countries have agreed to a deal to cut production by nearly 10 million barrels a day in May and June. Now, an economic editor, Abid Ali, said in an interview with Al Jazeera News, the pressure really came from the United States, which wanted to see a cut in production between 10 and 15 million barrels a day. Why? Because the shale industry in the United States is under threat.
Well, he continued, there could be up to 70-odd companies that fell because oil prices have dropped to $20 a barrel. Currently, we're at $33 a barrel, but that still isn't good enough for the shale producers. They need prices at $40 to $50 a barrel. Now, there are 10 million jobs associated with the shale industry in the United States, and that's a huge constituency for President Trump, who doesn't need any more job losses. In fact, in the last 3 weeks alone, we've seen 17 million job losses because of the pandemic.
Well, Saudi Arabia could have sustained another price war for another 2 or 3 years because they have huge amounts of well stored away in their foreign currency reserves. But pressure was also coming from oil-producing countries as well, like Nigeria, who set a budget of $59 a barrel. So they just turned to the IMF and the World Bank and requested $7 billion to see them through this pandemic. But there's other nations in a similar position as well.
That's right. Iran dismissed President Trump's claims that it is planning an attack on U.S. target, in Iraq. On Twitter, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said, "Iran starts no wars, but teaches lessons to those who do." Well, Trump says that U.S. intelligence believes Iran and its proxies mean to strike in Iraq, and he gave, of course, no details to support that.
Well, for the first time in history of the United States, every single state is under a federal disaster declaration due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, at the same time, President Trump wants to get the economy back up and running, but the cost could be high. The president says he'll listen to all sides when he launches a task force next week to restart the economy. He said in a press briefing, he said, "I only hope to God that it's the right decision. I would say without question that it's the biggest decision that I've ever had to make."
Well, meanwhile, the president's top experts say that we need to exercise caution. Now, Governor Cuomo of New York said, "You can't ask the people of this state or this country to choose between lives lost and dollars gained." Well, no one is going to make that quid pro quo. Cuomo and Maryland's Governor Larry Hogan issued a joint statement from the National Governors Association. They said that stay-at-home orders and other public health measures have caused catastrophic damage to the state's economies and called on Congress, of course, for $500 billion in aid.
Well, Representative Hakeem Jeffries said if we allow our city and state budgets to be decimated, that problem is just going to continue to grow worse. The Trump administration has also been haggling with the airlines to keep workers on the job. They're eligible for $25 billion, but multiple sources say that they might have to pay some of that back to taxpayers, according to the Treasury Department. Now, as for the stimulus checks to individuals, the IRS said that those will start going out next week.
Well, there are over 500,000 cases of COVID-19 in the U.S., as we reported earlier, with more than 20,000 deaths. Both those numbers right now lead the world. But the curve appears to be flattening, as they said, and the number of new cases continue to slow, and the rate of hospitalizations are down, suggesting that eventually the death rates will also slow as well. Well, with nearly 17 million Americans filing for unemployment claims, the president is eager to reopen the economy by May 1st.
But two big ifs play a factor in getting back to normal. One is if we continue to practice social distancing, which is working, and the other if is if we're able to institute large-scale testing to see who has the disease, who's recovered, and do contact tracing. Well, that might seem like the end to a lot of concerned citizens, but according to a quote from Winston Churchill, this is not the end, it is perhaps the end of the beginning.
Yeah. And I don't think that, society, not only in the United States, but throughout the world, I don't think we're ever going to go back to normal as we used to know it. And so, a lot of economies are suffering very badly, and they're requesting a lot of money from the governments and the International Monetary Fund, and it's going to take a while to get things ramped back up to some type of measurable status. But that's the hope of everybody, to get the economies back open. Everybody can, kind of get out from underneath these restrictions and try to kind of go ease back into, some type of recognizable life.
Right, but like you said, so many things have been affected by the coronavirus. I mean, outside of just the people whose lives were changed forever because of it, it's the whole economy and everything else. So getting back to normal is probably never going to take place, but people are going to try, and that is a little bit of hope that they're looking for.
Right, and one thing that's not going to be replaced are those lives lost. People are still going to have to deal with the fact that many loved ones have died as a result of this coronavirus, which is an ongoing effect that they'll kind of have to work through as life carries on. Well, if you'd like to find out a little bit more about what the Holy Scriptures say concerning this time period that we're living in right now, and also what Yishtar Hawkins has brought out concerning this being the first of 7 plagues to come upon mankind, contact the house of Yahweh to learn more and what you can do to protect your family. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to yahweh.com, yisraelhawkins.com, yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to ypnnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can email them at info@yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And if you haven't checked out the 2 Bible Help study tools on the market, they're absolutely free. You can do so by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com. Both of them have searches. You can type in any keyword or phrase and pull up pages and pages of information guaranteed to keep you occupied if you have a stay-at-home order or are quarantined for any reason. Guaranteed to occupy your time as you wait this out and see the end result.
Well, don't go anywhere. Get your holy scriptures and some paper and something to write with, because up next, for some very informative information, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.